I lost both of my parents 2 hours and 45 minutes apart from one another. I had been separated from my family for most of the 25 years.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Muldowney, aka the Glam Reaper herself. And on today's episode, this is going to be a tough one, I think, for a few people. I've got my dear friend Andre, who is going to be sharing his story of love and loss. And I will let Andre introduce himself. But yeah, this is going to be a tough one for a few people. Andre, welcome to the show.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, Glam Reaper fans, friends, etc. My name is André Archimbaud. It is not terribly Irish, but that's how Jennifer and I met almost a decade
Yeah.
ago. It's hard to believe. I'm very active in the Irish community here in New York, and our paths crossed and have kept crossing for the last decade or so. And I live in the New York area. I run a digital advertising agency here in the area, and I've wanted to talk to you about some of this for a couple of years, and I think the kind of the gestation period uh, hit the right way right around now. It made sense to reach out.
Yeah, you've definitely been through it and at one of the toughest times globally, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and just as a little bit of background to give, because you know the story, if not
Yeah.
detail by detail, fairly closely anyway. I At the beginning of the pandemic, I lost both of my parents 2 hours and 45 minutes apart from one another in their home in suburban Austin. I had been separated from my family for most of the 25 years that I was with my ex-wife. There's a lot of family dynamic and drama, and there were players on all parts of that. I've taken responsibility and onus for what I did and didn't do, and largely my folks did too. Being there for them at the end was the least I could do for the challenges that we as a family faced for most of those 25 years.
Yeah. And take us through, I guess, that 24 hours period surrounding your parents' death, and take us through because yeah, like tell the listeners, you're starting from scratch, I guess, right?
Sure,
We're hearing the story fresh. So yeah, and Irish people, we are storytellers by nature. So yeah, take us
sure.
back to like that 24 hours and everything that was going on and the emotions and I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think to be fair to the situation, because of the complexity, it kind of needs to be, and I'm not trying to be even more drawn out than usual, but to be fair to the story, I think it needs to be fully fleshed out so that it's understood. And again, against the backdrop of where we found ourselves, 6 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, I had visited Austin, where my folks and sister and family had lived and have lived for much of the last 25 plus years. I had visited them 3 or 4 times after reconnecting with them in late 2019, early 2020. And it was the last visit that it was decided that I would need to move there to help look after mom and dad for what we genuinely thought would be a year or two window to get them back on their feet. Myself, my brother, and our sister, the three of us had pretty deep conversation on that last trip about a month before I moved, and decided, whatever we had to do to make this work, fiscally, physically, and all of the other ways to enable this to happen, we would. Up to and including my brother buying my airplane ticket, my sister buying food because of the pandemic for me to have stocked in the kitchen because I was under quarantine when when I arrived from New York into
yeah.
Texas, and it was a very complicated time, complicated and complicating. We in hindsight, sitting here now 6 years later, I'm proud of the way that all went down. Towards the end of March of 2020, I made the move. I vacated my apartment in Manhattan, left and went down to suburban Austin. And within 12 to 24 hours of that time, we found out that it was not as rosy a scenario as we had hoped, that dad was in worse shape. Mom had been sick for about 15 years. Dad had been sick for about 6 months. And in short, mom had been diagnosed with multiple myeloma in 2004. Dad was diagnosed with aplastic anemia in October of 2019. I've made the joke because you develop a gallows humor around this, but never go to the doctor on Halloween because that's when he got his diagnosis. And so,
Right.
and normally, aplastic anemia is not the kind of thing that kills you. It's the kind of thing that can cause complications if you have. And I had never heard this term. Your listeners, and I know you would. I had never heard the term comorbidity in my life. One of his doctors said, the series of comorbidities that dad was dealing with, it was a bad mix. And so within 24 hours of me arriving, we realized it was not going to be quite the situation that we had hoped. And a few days later, we did a call with dad, his doctors, the care team at the hospital where he was, my sister on the line, our brother on the line. And again, all socially distanced because at the beginning of the pandemic. And I was genuinely in quarantine at a otherwise vacant house in suburban Austin. Dad said, your mother and I have been together for almost 55. We've been married for almost 55 years. They had been together 2 more years than that. So, 57 years, whatever. They had the conversation about going together, if at all possible. It wasn't assisted in any way, but it was as you would know and your listeners would know, likely would know, at the end when you come off of, oh gosh, it just flew out of my head, the term, when you come off dialysis, after months and months of dialysis in my mother's case and a few weeks in my dad's case, you're literally on, you're talking 7 to 10 days depending on and that's almost exactly what happened. And so dad came home, we called mom, expressed dad came home to hospice care. We got on the phone with mom that day or the next day and explained to her what was going on. She was in a nursing home. She was ready. It was very strange because 7 or 8 months earlier, she had had a pretty severe stroke where I had to feed her. She needed help, doing pretty much anything. And that last 10 days that she was with us, she was all so crystal clear. And I know they talk about that, but it was a minor miracle to witness. It really was. And then zeroing in on that, what you actually asked, the last, 24 hours, I was the only one staying at the house. Our brother, didn't feel comfortable flying in, because of the pandemic, and our sister is local to Austin still. So, I was staying at the house, and the hospice nurse came in and woke me at around, I wanna say around 3:30 or 4 o'clock. And as I'm walking to the back bedroom where their master suite was, she said, "I don't know if you're aware of what you're about to walk into," because mom was, in the throes of death rattle and starting to, you know, proceed in that direction. And I said, "I'm not fully aware, but that's what I'm here for, is to be here for this and, do what's needed," and made it back there, rang my sister. She came over within 20 minutes, half an hour maybe, and then genuinely for the next, I think it was 15 hours, we had someone on the line, on the phone, And at one point, I think we had as many as 10 different family members on the phone talking, cousins, aunts, uncles. I was born in New Jersey, but I was raised in Texas, and my parents and sisters stayed there. The rest of the family is mostly around the tri-state area here in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, all pretty much New York and New Jersey. And then my brother is in LA with his husband. One cousin is in LA with his husband, and then kind of got everybody sort of rallied for that next. Like I said, it was about a 15-hour phone call where someone was always on the line, and it was, in a great many ways, it was really, really beautiful for considering all that it was. If you buy into the religious aspect of things, and it's not my thing really at all, but, the irony of all of this is that mom started going sooner, but lingered longer, and dad actually died. He didn't start rattling until about 2 or 2:30 that afternoon, and then died about 8 hours later. Mom genuinely hung on for about 22 hours. 21 hours, give or take. Again, the gallows humor comes out. Dad was a big personality, a big hard to explain it any other way, and it's no wonder that he upstaged mom by dying on Good Friday instead of, leaving Holy Saturday to mom. No one cares about Holy
Yeah.
Saturday the same way, and a lot of people talk about, the fact that, well, it was peaceful, it was, sort of all at once, and certainly, in a way, there's something to be said for that, but at the same time, it's also, and you would get this, your listeners likely would too, it's also, you're dealing with 2 sets of undertakers coming in to clear out, the bodies. You're dealing with I then spent the next 6 weeks living in mom and dad's, again, otherwise vacant house, sorting through everything that was left behind, which, in hindsight, there was something to be said for that, for the fact that I did miss so much of that time with them and the rest of the family, but at the same time, it was still very vacant for the fact that they weren't there, their things were. I ended up spending 5.5 months all in Austin before coming back to the East Coast, and the only reason I stayed as long as I did was to reconnect with my sister, her husband, and their kids. I also have other friends and family, or other friends in and around Austin, Dallas, etc. So I tried to make the most of that. And again, this was all of this was happening while the world was sideways.
Yeah, I mean, it was such an interesting time globally, like in the whole world, never mind state by state or country by country. It was such a crazy time, and to be dealing with all of this, I can only imagine. And I guess I just, a couple of questions. So you went to Austin in the hopes of kind of taking care of your parents, I guess, and rebuilding or reconnecting, and all of a sudden within days you are experiencing them dying, actively dying. We talk a lot about medical aided dying and stuff like that, and the choice and the right to die and all that, and we've had some episodes on that, or at least touched on it in various different conversations. And your parents, they wanted to go together, and here they did. And I have, in my experience, in my role, I have seen people 100% die of heartache and heartbreak, having lost
Yeah.
somebody. Obviously, what we're talking about here with you is, one was dying and one sort of pipped her to the post, as you said in your dark humor. He
Sure.
got in there. There always has to be one who'll do it. I don't know. People talk about how ailments are attributed to things happening in our daily life. Your mom was sick for 16 years. Do you think your dad's illness was almost brought on in companionship, or in a heartache kind of a way, or in some, and I mean, it's so incredible that they both came off dialysis and they both went within such a short period of time together.
Yeah.
Do you think anything spiritual from it? I know, religion is not, but have you had that thought of, especially the fact that you knew they wanted to go together?
So a couple of things are at play here, I think, in my real answer to this, and I'm gonna answer this very real, right? The couple that I saw for most of my not only childhood, but also into adulthood, was grossly dysfunctional, very confusing behavior, up to and including, you know, uh shortly after mom was diagnosed, dad did a lot of heavy lifting, pun fully intended there, with mom, for those first couple of years after she was diagnosed, and he sort of, you know, they there had been troubles, across the years with their marriage, right? They were separated once or twice before I was born. I'm the youngest. Then they were very close to separated several times across the years. Like I say, about 2 or 3 years after mom was diagnosed, there was a very real threat of dad moving out, and even in that dynamic, there was the dysfunction was the 2 of them calling each of us kids to try to parlay, favor, etcetera, and I say to you what I said to them now, call it 20 years ago, give or take. I just want you both to be happy, and it feels like this isn't what happy is, and then I alluded to it or hinted at it, but my divorce to the woman I was with for 25 years between marriage and dating, ended legally ended about 4 months before mom and dad died. That's in that mix as well, and the dynamic there was always like, well, how can they advise me on my, marriage, on my relationship? Theirs is such a wreck, and it was something that was very real for me and expressed in, counseling and therapy sessions and, like and in hindsight, to some degree, I think that there was, lessons learned that they were trying to convey. So after they actually died, a lot of the other part of the reason that I stuck around Texas and specifically took on the charge of sorting through, I've may have said this to you across the years, but I stuck around and was so diligent with their stuff because I wanted to find their Rosetta Stone of what made them
Mm.
work. How did because the thing I saw never seemed worth saving. You know what I mean? It really except for the kids, quote unquote, and, I had developed a thick enough skin by the time I was 14 or 15, maybe 16 that, like, like I said, I probably around that time, I was like, "I just want you both to be happy." That's kind of a lot to put on a 14, 16-year-old, whatever, you know what I mean? At that intersection is where sort of all of that, happened, and it is worth noting, my mother had, an aunt and uncle, so a great aunt and uncle of mine, who died within an hour of each other, and it's gonna be a little and I've said this to friends, you may have even been one of those friends to whom I've said this, but the extent of the self-serving aspect of this that you talked about, was it the heartbreak? I actually think that me telling them and sharing with them some of what I went through was
Mm.
a contributing factor to all of this. Like, they couldn't look that in the eye as parents, even though, I'm a grown adult and was a grown adult for that whole time. I think they may have had a tough time reconciling. And I was very direct when I reconnected with dad. I don't know if you know, but that story is rooted in it through Ireland too. Hadn't been in touch with my dad in 11 years, and I texted him Memorial Day weekend, 2019, and I knew he and my twin nephews were in Europe, but I didn't know if they were in Ireland or France. That was the agenda. either Ireland or France. They were going over for Normandy for the 75th anniversary of Normandy, D-Day. And I texted my dad at what would have been about 2:30 in the morning. And I said, I understand that you're heading back from Europe. Any chances that you're heading back through Newark being the closest, either Newark or JFK? And knowing my dad, he would have gone through Newark. And at 2:30 in the morning, within 3 to 5 minutes of me texting him, he texted me right back and said, "I would love nothing more than to see you." And when I saw them 7 to 10 days later or whatever it was, when they flew back from Normandy, I should point out they were in Cork City. They were staying in the exact same hotel I had been in 4 months earlier. Like,
Oh
what are
my
the odds on that? There's a whole raft of that kind of stuff that has gone on with this. And so when they came back, I was very direct with him. I said, "Listen, we all played a part in all of this." And I would have hoped that that would have been enough to kind of mitigate any sort of overt amount of guilt or, what have you. But I do think that that intersection there was a big piece of it. And no doubt the 57 or 58 years of their relationship, their marriage, the love they had, because I did find, I want to be really clear, I did find that Rosetta Stone. I found the love letters. I further want to be clear. It wasn't just finding the love letters. Everybody has love letters if they've traded from, partner to partner over the years. Everybody. But they were real and it
goodness.
was sincere, and it wasn't, my dad was not a saint. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but there was something real there for a very long time, so much so that once he resigned, and we discussed this, he and I, once they moved through that window of, possible separation in '06, '07 timeframe, he resigned himself to being the caregiver, being the husband, being the husband that he should have always been. Put
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we all come to Jesus moments at various different points in our life. And obviously that was, maybe one of his. What made you send that text?
The previous 4 or 5 Memorial Day weekends were bad for me, and this was my first one solo. And funnily enough, from where I live now, about 100 yards from where I live is a wedding venue. I went to a wedding at that venue in basically right in Liberty State Park. I went to that the next day. That was a Sunday, and then the Monday of Memorial Day, I I it was so nice. I had nothing on the menu per se. I could just so I went to Central Park, I got my run in, came home, had some dinner, sat down, and I watched Field of Dreams, which was unsurprisingly a touchstone for me alone, and then with him. And then the film finished, I sent him. That's when I sent him the text within minutes of that film finishing. And I had heard from my brother, who I had always been close with through the years and still am very, very close with. He had given me the skinny on what their travel plans were, generally either Ireland or France. And then lo and behold, they were in Cork City. And, I'm that last 9 months, 10 months, or whatever it was, we were pretty back to normal. There was one instance at some point, I think it was during that second to last trip to Austin, where dad lost his cool. Part of what made him tough to deal with was he had a very bad temper, and occasionally was violent. Never overt, never not the kind of thing that you would ring the cops for, but it was it was that kind of, he would fly off the handle at times. And I saw that the one time in that window in January or February of 20, where he was still with it. The other thing about this is part of why we didn't really grasp the severity of things is that when I went down there in January of 20, I described to people that dad was 75, 80%. And then I joked, as I sort of alluded to earlier, 75% of Brian Archimbaud was 100% of most people. And so we really didn't think that this was gonna be it. And then when I went back 3 or 4 weeks later for what was kind of a mix of his birthday. My brother was in town for, that's the other thing is Scott had just been in town prior to that. So, it was during that. And within an hour of me arriving that second time in 2020, within an hour, I was like, I have to move here because he's in such rough shape. And he had gone from 75, 80 down to closer to 50 or less in that 3 or 4 week window. So it was precipitous, and mom genuinely was pretty stable. She could have survived on dialysis for the next several years, is my understanding. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's my understanding of it.
I know there's several listeners who have gone experienced this. I know I have worked with clients who have we've had double funerals, I guess, is the easiest way to I don't know what it's called. I don't think there's a term for it, but a duet, where we've had two bodies or two,
Sure.
remains, and whether it's father and daughter or a couple, it's a lot, and it's a lot on the immediate family. It's a lot to it's a lot even on me as a professional,
Sure.
helping
I would
to
imagine.
organize, because you want to represent two people equally, and there's a lot of different connections, a lot of different relationships, and then there's the emotional weight of it. But when it came to an the funeral and everything like that, how did you do the 2 of them? You had the 2 of them in?
Yeah, they were fairly devout Catholics. In some ways, dad more so because he used to prattle on about, I miss the days when they did the masses in Latin and facing away. And I'm like,
Wow.
but then conversely, yeah, Vatican II and all of that. But then conversely, he was not necessarily the best Catholic in that sense. And then on the other side of the thing, mom was devout to maybe to a fault on the other side of a lot of things. Thankfully, the church relaxed cremation, I think in probably sometime in the 20 teens, give or take. Don't quote me on the timing. It was within the few years around then. And so when they died, the undertakers took them, again, separated by about 4 hours. The first undertaker came within the hour, and the second undertaker came about 5 hours after mom died, 4 hours after mom died. So that process was about 5 hours apart. But we had them cremated. Their remains, or cremains, I guess, as they technically, they stayed at my sister's place, or her house in North Austin, for most of the next 18 months. And then we found a window where it was going to work for everybody to be able to travel, despite the fact that that they spent 35 of the last 40 years of their lives in Texas. They both wanted to be buried in the Northeast, and that's even a funny story. It was really my dad's family plot in Union City, New Jersey, just outside the Lincoln Tunnel. And at some point during that last week of mom's life, she was very with it. Dad was not, and he started to slip by, like day 4 or 5, and had another 5 or 6 days after that. But mom was with it basically until the last 36 hours of her life, really with it, shockingly. And I know I mentioned that earlier. But at some point in that middle conversation, uh, she found out or heard that the plot was not her family plot in Bloomfield, New Jersey. And she started to kind of kick up a fuss, but there was paperwork that said that they had signed off on this. So there was nothing. It just was, out of sight, out of mind, maybe. And my sister and I exchanged glances at each other like, is she really going to kick up a fuss right now about this? With days, remaining. But at any rate, so Labor Day weekend of 21, we did a joint funeral for the both of them, and in Union City, sort of standard issue. We did the funeral mass at the church where they were married in Bloomfield, New Jersey, and then did sort of a tour around Bloomfield, East Orange, and a few other, spots where where they had lived or spent time together or as kids or whatnot. And then we laid them to rest at the cemetery, and then we did the repast, actually about 10 blocks from where I'm sitting on the other direction. So I think that the fact that I've landed where I've landed in Jersey City is a bit of kismet for a whole bunch of reasons.
Well, I mean, I'm a firm believer in seeing signs or that the universe has a plan for us and that certain things are kismet. I absolutely believe it. I
Yeah,
never would push that on anyone else.
sure.
With clients and I welcome them to sort of bring their thoughts to the table, and we all experience things in different ways. But I know for me, for absolutely 100%, I've gotten signs from beyond when I'm working with a client, whether it's a song coming on the radio randomly or actual bugs, like a
Sure.
ladybird. I think you've got a ladybug showing up, and that was the obsession of the deceased or whatever it might be. I've had so many different signs. So I do. I definitely think things
Yeah.
come full circle, and you are ushered in certain ways. And look, I don't know, I'm not an expert on this, but whether they look after us beyond the grave or they're literally sitting beside me, who knows. It sounds, Andre, I mean, you've been through a lot, but it sounds like you're in a comfortable place right now with it. It sounds like, as you said, that you and I have known each other for a very long time. I've been doing this for a very long time. The podcast is now in its sixth year. It started in COVID. As we come to kind of to the close of this episode, what made you want to share this story, I guess, publicly? You've always shared it publicly to a certain degree.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
How are you feeling right now? What's your
Um, if I'm brutally honest, there's still a decent amount of regret around what didn't happen in the
Yeah.
windows when and I think a lot of the reason I wanted to do this with you is specifically after hearing other episodes that you've done with others around death, dying, grief, grieving, etc. And knowing how challenging it's been for me at times over the last 6 years, those regrets manifest in, if I had done X, could Y have happened instead of what did happen? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if I can
Yeah.
convey that to your audience to try to bridge that gap as best you can. I was very hard headed for a long time about a lot of stuff that wasn't worth being hard headed about. But I also am keenly aware of the fact that I have the luxury of hindsight that
Yeah.
you don't necessarily get that, and you certainly don't get it when you're in it, when you're in the midst of a conflict, familial or otherwise. It always takes some hindsight, whether that hindsight is, half an hour, 6 months or 6 years. And so we're recording this around St. Patrick's Day, and we're in that window. I said this to somebody who just marked the 1-year anniversary of her father having passed last year. And I told her, I said, that's what this window is for me, starting basically from
Yeah.
dad's birthday all the way through Easter. It's this 4 to 6 week window of, remembrances and trying to wade through that. And then it's not always easy. It's not always easy.
No?
And I heard recently about, I wish I could remember the specific line, but it was about how, grief is a moving target. And there are times when it is really on top of you. And then other times it can come out as a funny, awkward laugh or smile, or you think about, something that happened years ago, and it helps to kind of fill in the the blurry edges of maybe a tainted memory. So,
Yeah.
it's a moving target. That is something I wasn't expecting.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, Andre, I think that's such a beautiful concept to end the episode on is, you sharing your story and thank you for being like super vulnerable and sharing your story with us in all its reality and rawness, right? Is we will probably all have some form of regrets in some way, shape, or form in life. That's just the way life is, I think.
Sure.
Um,
No doubt.
but staying disconnected from people, and I have had a lot of my own friends come and go, and really it comes down to, is this the hill you want to die on, like in your stubbornness or in your lack of wanting to make it up with somebody? And if it is, that's okay. Like if you're willing to let this go and never see this person again, and potentially one of you die, and that's it, then that's okay. Then that's the
Sure.
choice you're making. Where if it's just stubbornness, or if it's just you wanting to stick to your, then that's maybe something to revisit for you. And I think that's a great note for us all to take away and to think about. Is there somebody in your life that you could send that 2 a.m. text to?
Yeah, and trying to reconcile that. Not only reconcile that relationship, but reconcile the fact that by cutting people out, and I felt like I had to. I wanna be really, really clear. I felt like I
Yeah.
had to, for most of those 25 years. That reconciliation is twofold. One, it's a reconciliation with the people, but then it's also a reconciliation of your own actions, your own behavior,
Yeah.
your even up to and including your thoughts in those moments.
You got to look at yourself. Yeah. Andre, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being raw and vulnerable with us. And yeah, we wish you the best of luck in your, as we all know, continuous grief journey, because it does not end. It's a lifetime, it's a lifelong disease, grief.
It is.
We find humor in the dark moments, and we wish you all the best of luck with it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Jennifer. Great to see you.